lives and our food and our training, and then walk in with a suicide bomb or walk in and start shooting our own guys. And I think you all know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to be shy. It's Conduit.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Let's welcome to the program. We've got Mr. Tim Jacob on the phone. Tim, it's always great to have you on, sir. You're a term limits advocate. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for allowing me to be on this morning.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. You know, listen, I think term limits is a good idea. I think taking it from 16 down to 10 is a good idea. I know there are other people that disagree. You know, they can make arguments to the contrary, and, you know, I respect those people, and I can respectfully disagree with them and agree to disagree and hopefully work together on other issues. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. There does seem to be some legislators out there who are, you know, coming out and saying, listen, we think this is a terrible idea.
Well, I think it's a great thing, and I'm very grateful that we're having this debate this time, because in 2014, when the legislature put through that fraudulent amendment and deceptive amendment, we did not have that debate. So I'm glad that after a 3-year bout of laryngitis that some of them have gotten their voice back. And I think it's a healthy when we debate this statewide. Good people can disagree about this, but everyone can agree that deception does not work in Arkansas and has no place in Arkansas politics. And that's exactly what the legislature and the lobbyists did in 2014.
And that is a great point, and I feel like that to me is the one reason, is probably my biggest motivator to vote for this. You know, aside from the fact at the end of the day, it's like, hey, do you think 16 years is good, or do you think a decade is good? And I'm like, okay, a decade's fine. Let's, you know, you go past a decade, it really can become a career, and not for, you know, career politicians. But the main thing here, and I've been trying to talk about this a little bit, is that what John Woods did, and, you know, convicted felon John Woods, and now really the rest of the General Assembly too, because, and I know there were people that did speak out against it at the time, but like you said, there wasn't this kind of debate that we're having right now. Now we're having a much broader debate with more people involved. Our own government lied to the people intentionally. They intentionally, we can blame most of it on John Woods, but the fact is the rest of the General Assembly voted for it. They voted for the title, and it went there. It was deceptive, and our own government lied to us. And now the people are taking the pendulum, and we're attempting to swing it back. And I don't think anybody should be surprised by that. I think that's a healthy thing.
I tend to agree with you. I think it's very healthy, and let's be sure to point out that senators can now stay 22 years, depending on how those 2-year terms fall. 22 years is not a term limit. That's a limit that anybody who doesn't believe in term limits could live with. So it's gone from 22, and here is the question Arkansas voters have to ask themselves. Do we want to live by an amendment written in silence by a convicted felon who's defrauded the state of Arkansas, or are we going to have an amendment written by the people that, in most part, has already won 2 landslide elections? Mm-hmm. We've got to decide whether the legislature is going to set their own terms or the people are going to have to say so. The biggest problem with this issue is that we've had 2 statewide landslide elections, and the so-called representatives of the people do not represent the people. They have not accepted the will of the people. They have not accepted the vote. They haven't respected voters, and they haven't respected the vote. And we have to get back to that situation here.
One of the, I guess, negative aspects of this, according to the opponents of this term limits initiative that's on the ballot, is that bureaucrats will be empowered, and that bureaucrats love the idea of term limits because they are able to trick and dupe ignorant legislators who don't have a grasp of how things work when they first get down there. Can you respond to that criticism?
Nothing could be further from the truth. No bureaucratic organization
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program this morning. Good morning to everybody out there. So glad that you are with us. As always, you have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. If you want to be a part of that, first of all, you're listening, so thank you. You already are a part of that, but you can call us or text us, 870-275-9799. You can sound off on our YouTube channel, Conduit News. Be sure to subscribe and click the little bell to receive notifications. Also over at facebook.com/Conduit News. Had a jam-packed day yesterday after I got off the air. I started getting ready for an interview. I guess it was about 1:45 or so. I can't really remember. With Congressman Devin Nunes was in Arkansas yesterday. Do what? Sorry, Joe. 11:45. Sorry, I'm giving Joe a timestamp for a video he's about to play, and so it was around 1:30 or so. I think 1:45. I got to interview Devin Nunes. He is the chairman of the permanent select permanent committee on intelligence in the House. I mean, it's a really big deal that he was here. Of course, Congressman Rick Crawford here, in Arkansas, he is on that committee as well. And so it was really an incredible event, and I got to sit down with Congressman Nunes just for about 6 minutes. I asked him a few questions. I know he had to he had to get back on a plane, and I know he's making the rounds across flyover country, and of course I think it was remarked at some point yesterday that because when you actually have people that stop in flyover country, they're showing you that they don't think it's flyover country because they're not flying over it. They're actually stopping here. I thought that was interesting. And very, very well said. But it was a great event, and we're going to play that interview for you. You can get a head start on this if you want. It's already up right now. It's the exclusive interview up right now at conduitnews.com. We're going to play it a little later in the program. Make sure that we're probably going to make sure we get it in both hours of the program, just for those of you who maybe only get to catch 1 hour at a time. And it was really surreal getting to interview Devin Nunes on the 17th anniversary of September 11th. Speaking of September 11th, let's go ahead and start here. President Donald Trump giving an amazing speech yesterday in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, Flight 93, the tribute there. We're not going to play the whole thing for you, but this is towards the end of the speech. President Donald Trump said this.
Inscribed with those three precious words, all my love. Those words echo across this field. And those words tell the story of 40 men and women who gave all their love for their families, their country, and our freedom. To Dorothy and to every family here today, America will never forget what your loved ones did for all of us. Earlier this week, you dedicated the final part of this memorial, the Tower of Voices. Standing at 93 feet tall, the Tower of Voices is now the first structure visitors see when they come to this now sacred ground. It will hold 40 beautiful chimes that ring throughout these fields, each a unique note, but all in perfect harmony. Each time we hear those chimes playing in the wind, we will remember the 40. We will remember their faces, their voices, their stories, their courage, and their love. And we will remember that free people are never at the mercy of evil, because our destiny is always in our hands.
All right, stop. I mean, that's incredible. It's such an American thing to say, isn't it? It's just an incredible speech. I would encourage you to go listen to the whole thing. That particular YouTube clip there was about 15 minutes. If you go watch the whole thing, it won't take much time of your day. Really, really powerful stuff. Of course, the media. What did the media do? They criticized President Trump because when he arrived at the event, he fist pumped, or gave two fists up or something, like he was excited to see the people who were there. And of course, that's been criticized, and that's when I typed in on YouTube this morning. I was like, let me get this clip here. So it was, President Trump. What did I type in exactly? President Trump 9/11 is what I typed in. And if you go to YouTube and you type in President Trump 9/11, the first hit is from Lawrence O'Donnell of MSNBC, and it says President Donald Trump's 9/11 lies and behavior in Shanksville. Then the next entry is a CNN video. Trump fist pump before 9/11 service criticized. Let's see here. And then you have the third video is an MSNBC video, or no, NBC News, that says President Donald Trump's full speech honors 9/11 victims at Shanksville Memorial. I mean, so it's the third entry until you just get the speech, right? But it's just unbelievable that they can't stand it. A couple of days ago, Maxine Waters, this is what she said. Just real quick, I just want to give you a taste of what happens if the Democrats take the House. This is what's going to happen.
But when I compare what you're doing with what we have in Washington, D.C., in the highest office of the land, I wake up in the middle of the night and all I can think about is I'm going to get him. I'm going to get him. I'm going to get him. I have never seen anything like this before in my life. And so to all of our elected officials, to Betty, to all of you progressives that are here, we've got some work to do. And it's not simply about resistance. It's about ensuring that we help people to understand that we deserve better. Yes. That this deplorable, despicable human being that occupies the White House should not be there. We should not be comfortable with it. We should not think about how somebody else is going to deal with. This is all of our fight. Yeah. And every day I say, I'm in this fight. Yeah. I'm in this fight and I'm not going to move. And as you know, there's a difference in how some of our leadership talk about how we should handle all of this. They say, Maxine, please don't say impeachment anymore. And when they say that, I say impeachment, 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 impeachment.
Stop. All right, so, yeah, I mean, crazy. And, of course, impeach him for what? Well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because we don't like him. Okay, well, there's no prescription for that. But go right ahead. I mean, and again, I want to reiterate the importance of the people of District 2. You have Republican French Hill that needs to go back to Washington, D.C., and he's running against Democrat Clark Tucker. Now, according to the Talk Business and Hendrix College poll that was released yesterday, French Hill has a 9-point lead, 49%, 9-point lead. Now, I mean, but you don't need to think, okay, he's up 9 points. You need to be engaged. You need to tell your friends and family. You got to make sure that you guys get out there. Everybody's got to go vote. But the people of District 2 need to make sure that Congressman French Hill goes back, in my opinion, because what's going on, I mean, what you just saw there, yeah. Impeachment, 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 impeachment. And the Democrats, I mean, they vote in lockstep with one another, and not to mention you got Nancy Pelosi, who wants to, she wants to get that gavel back, right? She wants to take the majority back, and, man, I'm telling you what, I don't know mentally. Well, let's just say this. If that were to happen, I don't think conservatives would, be going to therapy like liberals and progressives are going to therapy. There's that story that therapists are making more money now because they're actually treating people. They're seeing people who have Trump derangement syndrome. People are having to go to therapy because they just can't handle it. And you know who's really to blame for that, aside for, weak personal constitutions, it's the media. The media is, instead of talking about the substance of what 9/11 was, the tragedy that it was, they're talking about President Donald Trump's fists. Think about that for a second. They're talking about Donald Trump's fists instead of the 40 people that said, you know what, we've got to do something. And they took the plane down. They're talking about Donald Trump's fists. They have a disease. I mean, they are sick, in my opinion. They need help. And the media is, generating all of this because they want an emotional reaction from their audience. They don't want to just put the facts out there and let people make up their own minds. They want an emotional response. It's all about an emotional response, not a logical response. And anyway, it's better for their clicks, better for their ratings, I guess. The phone number, 870-275-9799. Coming up on Conduit News Radio this morning, we're going to be talking with the Patriots VAC 746. Mr. John Calvin Martin is coming up at the bottom of this hour. I'm going to talk about red flag laws and some of the meetings that have been taking place, the POA meetings that have been taking place all over the state. Really, really swelling in popularity. I've been seeing the live stream videos. People are posting of the meetings. There's a ton of interest, a lot of educational outreach, a lot of grassroots movements going on, and it's really, really encouraging to see people get engaged. And then at the top of the next hour, 7:05, we'll be talking with Senator Brian King. I'm interested to talk to Senator Brian King, Arkansas Senator Brian King, because, he has been one of the key voices in exposing corruption, speaking out about the corruption that goes on in Little Rock at the Marble Palace there. And I'm just curious if he saw what I saw last week. Over at conduitnews.com, we have the video from Monday where I went over the top 5 stories that I missed while I was on vacation last week. And the number one story, according to me, that I missed was the fact that convicted Senator John Woods approached Senator Jim Hendren, we now know because of court documents that were unsealed, and asked for a $10,000 bribe in the event that both of them got put in the same district during redistricting. And so he basically saying, I won't run against you, Jim, but I'm going to need you to pay me $10,000. Now, it was reported that Senator Hendren went to the authorities and was told that we can't convict him or charge him, rather. We can't charge him just based on your word. We need you to wear a wire. According to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, Senator Jim Hendren said, I didn't want to wear a wire. I decided against wearing a wire. I just decided to run my race. Okay. The reason this is relevant, and I want to get Senator King's thoughts on this, is because now that we have guilty plea after guilty plea and indictment after indictment, and the curtain has been pulled back at the Marble Palace, and we see corruption, and we see more coming. That more is going to be exposed here. We now we have the Senator Jim Hendren is trying to lead the Senate, quote lead, end quote, the Senate, to ethics reform, and one of his reforms is that senators will tattle on each other in this new Senate Ethics Committee. And I just feel like there is absolutely no credibility here for Senator Hendren at this point to continue to do this. And so I want to get Senator King's thoughts on that, because he has been a critic and he's been the lone voice in many cases, not always the lone voice, but in many cases the most vocal, the most certainly rough around the edges, which I think is what we need right now. And He's been out there saying all this stuff, and now we have somebody saying, Senator Hendren didn't file an ethics complaint when he was asked for a bribe. And so what's different now? These people are not going to police themselves. That's my point. And so we'll be talking to Brian King at 7 o'clock. Then we're going to be talking to Mr. Mark Meckler at 7:33. Mark Meckler is with the, get ready for it, folks, the Convention of the States Project. I wanted to have him on. I know it can be a controversial issue among conservatives, Article 5 Amendment Convention, Runaway Convention, or the way to possibly fix, the way we think of government now. It'll be an interesting conversation. I'm excited to have him on. Specifically, we are going to talk about Constitution Day. Constitution Day is coming up on September 17th, and I want to talk to Mr. Mark Meckler with the Convention of the States Project about that, because that's always a good day regardless. To educate kids and stuff about the Constitution in school and everything else. So we'll certainly do that. Folks, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to tell you about another guilty plea. That's right. We have another guilty plea out there in connection with Preferred Family Health Care. I'll tell you more about that. Also, Senator Jake Files, convicted Senator Jake Files. You have news about that. He will not have to repay the city of Fort Smith for the $27,000 he stole. That is huge news. I feel terrible. This is an outrage. I'll tell you about that when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome back to the program. We got on the telephone line this morning. Congressman French Hill joins us again. French, welcome back, sir.
Paul, it's great to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, sir. Hey, I want to start with the fact that this is the 17-year anniversary of the September 11, 2001 terror attacks on New York and the Pentagon. And I just, where were you? A lot of people ask that. Where were you on September 11, 2001?
At 7:46, I was driving between Bentonville, Arkansas, and Bella Vista, Arkansas, to go to my first meeting with the FDIC on a bank acquisition up at Bella Vista of a failed bank there. And I remember vividly hearing the news story that a small plane had clipped the antenna on
In a
Tower
world full
1.
of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal. Ethics. Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Okay, so got this message here. I understand that State Representative Doug House will be at the Faulkner County Tea Party lunch on Thursday. His topic, he'll be speaking about issue 1 on the ballot, which is the bad tort reform bill that is a terrible idea. And he's going to be speaking on why it's a bad idea, on why you need to vote no on it. Doug House, that'll be for those of you in the Central Arkansas area, those of you listening on the great radio station 101.1 The Answer. That's in Larry's Pizza. That's in Conway, Larry's Pizza. It's from 12 to 1 tomorrow. All are welcome. And you can come and get informed and listen to State Representative Doug House tell you what he thinks on that issue. Okay, so here we go. We have Eric Besson and Lisa Hammersley back with another report on preferred family health care. This headline here, a little different than the print version. The online version a little different than what came out of the print. But the headline here is new of scams, meaning this guy here knew of the scams going on at Preferred Family Health Care. He's an ex-executive of the nonprofit Preferred Family Health Care, and he takes a plea. That's right. His name is Keith Noble. Keith Noble was a psychologist at Preferred Family Health Care, but then he rose to the chief clinical officer, and he took a plea as essentially, implicating Tom and Bontia Goss, the former execs at the top of Preferred Family Health Care. Now, this is a company, you got to remember, Arkansas, it's not just a Missouri thing. Arkansas's got all of their contracts, or used to have. It took them forever to end the contracts, or to at least announce that they wanted to end the contracts, paying all of this Medicaid money to this corrupt company that's, bribing Arkansas officials via Rusty Cranford and who knows who else. And so this is not just a Missouri thing. I mean, this is Arkansas's money going to this. I mean, just bukus of cash. It says here that Noble was aware of multi-million-dollar schemes by other top executives to divert money from the charity's work to enrich themselves. It's a 28-page document where he admits that between 2005 and 2017, the company's top 3 former executives, along with Arkansas lobbyist Rusty Cranford, quote, embezzled, stole, obtained by fraud, all of this money. And he got $4.3 million personally. That's how much he was paid to do all this. So, anyway, they are saying that he's probably just going to get probation, but he's going to have to find a way to pay back the $4.3 million, enrichment scheme, how much money he got. He's going to have to pay restitution, which I think is interesting considering. I mean, you put that headline next to the fact that over here you have Senator Jake Files, that it's now said that Senator Jake Files will not have to pay back the $27,000 in state general improvement money to the city of Fort Smith. This is crazy to me. Fort Smith, I'm sorry. David Hughes reports on this, that there was a jury of 8 men and 4 women deliberated for about an hour before returning with a verdict against the city's accusations that the River Valley Sports Complex breached its contract with the city when it failed to build an 8-ball field complex on the city property. Of course, Files is serving He's in the middle of serving an 18-month sentence. He started that on August the 2nd. But here's the thing. Well, I'm running out of time here. I'll get to this later in the program.
And, of course, that's not what happened. But that's, as I was driving along, that's what the news report was.
Wow. And I was just saying last hour how much this event 17 years ago changed the country, the mentality of the country. Seems like, forever. Lots happened in 17 years.
Well, it's amazing. First, I want to say my salute to the families who lost somebody on 9/11, a first responder or somebody in one of the attacks. I lost a very good friend of mine I worked with at the Senate Banking Committee. Neil Levin was our counsel on the Banking Committee, and he had been named the head CEO of the Port Authority, and he was up in the windows on the world that day. And I think about him every year. He left his family behind. Yeah, it's changed our whole focus, and it's been devastating to see Islamic terrorism brought to the shores of America and brought to the shores of Europe, and it's changed our whole defense posture since that fateful day.
Yeah, it certainly has. I want to talk just a little bit about what you've been doing in Washington, D.C., and one of the things, that really stuck out to me, there's this program called the Congressional App Challenge. And first of all, tell us a little bit about that. What's the Congressional App Challenge?
Well, it follows on about 30 years ago. Congress wanted to encourage arts, and they had an art contest for all 435 congressional districts from high school students, and the winners from each district hung their art in the Capitol. And it's beautiful. You see it as you walk through the tunnel of the Capitol. So to flash forward to about 3 years ago, they wanted to encourage coding for high school students and encourage STEM activities, so they created the Congressional App Challenge. And last year, it's really grown. We had 75 applications submitted over the last couple of years, so it's really grown in our high schools, and we're encouraging our high schools to submit apps. And one of our winner last year, Ann Lee at Central High, went on to compete in the Nationals and was recognized in Washington.
And that's what I thought was interesting. This, Arkansas Ann Lee, her app specifically was a car check app to help parents not forget to take their children out of the car. And this is a tragedy, a potential tragedy that has actually happened and hit home right here in Arkansas. And I thought, wow, what a great idea to have an app to say, to remind parents to not leave their kids in the car,
and everything the Marble
Well, this
Palace
is what I love about
keep
kids,
trying to
because
cover
they're
up.
unfiltered
It's Conduit
when they're
News
thinking
Radio
about
with
art or
Paul
thinking about
Harrell.
coding for an app. They don't have all the clutter a lot of us.
Folks, the Patriots of Act 746, they're on a mission to educate the people of Arkansas about the realities of your gun rights, your human right of self-defense here in the state of Arkansas. You need to look them up. It's Patriots of Act 746. Go to Facebook.com, and in the search bar, type in Patriots of Act 746, and there you will see the group. Ask to be a member if you want more information. And we're going to give you a little bit more information right now because we have Mr. John Calvin Martin is on the program again. He's from the Patriots of Act 746. Good morning, John.
Good morning, my brother. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hey, let's start talking a little bit about some of these meetings that have been going on across the state. Patriots of Act 746 has several chapters across the state that meet regularly. Tell us about that.
Yes, sir. We are, man, I tell you, brother, we're so excited about the interest that is being made in the POA of 746. Seems like every meeting we go to just gets bigger and bigger. The energy is amazing. I was in Melbourne, which is actually not my section, but I just can't hardly stand it. I got to be with these folks. They are true Americans, red-blooded Americans, and I went into Melbourne last Saturday, and I'm telling you, the energy in that room, Paul, was amazing. Now, I'm a preacher, and so I look forward to being in rooms like that.
Yeah.
And it was just Tim Loggins just did a great job running everything. That guy, he knows the laws upside, downside, inside, and outside. And we had a lot of new people there, people that are just wondering about their rights. You know, again, and I try to plug this everywhere I go. This is not about being a militia or trying to overthrow anything. It's silly that anybody would loop us in with those groups, because we're not about overthrowing the government. We're just trying to make sure the government doesn't overthrow us.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and there's always people that try to try to paint conservative groups as really extreme, and you just got to dismiss those folks because it's ridiculous.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we just had our first Southeast POA meeting down here in Southeast Arkansas, and I tell you, it was amazing. It was an amazing deal. I think we had like 25, 26 people there first meeting. There's another new group that just started up in South Arkansas, and that's completely different, of course, from Southeast Arkansas. And they're planning their first meeting. I'm telling you, Paul, it's just amazing what patriots can do when we get together. You have to forgive me. I'm pretty excited about this deal.
Hey, I can tell. I can certainly tell. I can hear it in your voice.
Yes, sir.
So let's talk a little bit about what's been going on. We had some red flag laws. I mean, people are debating this concept. The Joint Performance Review Committee had Moms Demand Action, the radical anti-Second Amendment group. They spoke a couple of days ago about these red flag laws, about trying to also raise the age of what it takes to buy what they call an assault weapon, which turns out to be a semi-automatic weapon. I mean, what are your thoughts on all this, John?
Well, Paul, it makes me nervous anytime somebody starts talking about trying to update our rights or negate our rights, and that's all a red flag is. A red flag law. Now, just as a little kid, I would hear my mom and dad say, that throws up red flags. Well, that made me feel uncomfortable about the term red flags, because it always meant something appeared to be something it was not. Are you with me on that?
I'm with. Yeah, I understand.
The whole term red flag throws up red flags. And my problem with it is anytime somebody's trying to negotiate my rights, I have a problem with it on anything. Red flag law there's no possible way it cannot infringe on somebody's rights. It's just not possible. It boils down to, forgive me if I'm overexcited about this, but it just aggravates me when people are trying to update my rights. Red flag laws I guess I could say as just a simple term means literally that someone that doesn't like you can raise a red flag about your mentality, your mental state, and have your gun rights taken away. They're saying temporarily, but any at all is wrong. There's no way it cannot infringe on anybody's rights, for the simple fact that if my mother-in-law gets mad at me, then my gun rights are in jeopardy.
Yeah.
There's just no way that's right.
Yeah, the frustrating thing is, charge somebody. Charge them with a crime, right? I mean, if there's evidence, that's one way that's how you neutralize a threat. Charge somebody with a crime, go arrest them. But those laws are already on the books. That's how you can, there are ways to, quote, take somebody's Second Amendment rights away, and it's when you get arrested, right? You're not entitled to have a gun when you've been arrested, obviously. So we already have that, and that's the way it needs to stay. In my opinion. But we've seen that the General Assembly, they look like that they're open to this. We have heard from some Republicans, former Republicans as well on Facebook saying, hey, listen, red flag laws are inevitable, so we got to let the GOP write these red flag laws to make sure that it'll be basically a uniparty solution and not the far left solution. But any infringement is unacceptable, in my opinion, especially when we have, so many Republicans in control.
Exactly. And I think the one of the key words of the statements you just made was Republicans. I'm not sure. We're going to have to define that a little better. I'm not sure where we are on that because true conservatives have never fallen for the farce of a red flag law, and that's all it is. It's just another infringement, another speed bump on the life of conservatism. It's just another way to try to slow us down, deter us from the actual highway that we're on here, and that is simply that. And I don't want to again sound too crazy here, but all gun laws are an infringement, and that's simply put. So red flag laws to me are just they throw up red flags.
Yeah, it's
literally.
Talk a little bit about a lot of this comes from the human desire, to try to guarantee, try to eliminate risk. I guess. I mean that's really what they're saying is like we need to do this
right.
because we're trying to eliminate risk. And a lot of people, because they're so terrified of guns, they fall for the liberal talking points, the scare tactics, if you will. But there's a motivation here that some people really want to guarantee tomorrow. And when you start to do that, their solution, let's be clear what their solution is
right.
a less free society. We need less freedom in this case in order to, guarantee something that if we're really honest about it, they can't guarantee. They can't guarantee your safety. The government can't guarantee that somebody's not going to, do something bad to someone else. And so it's a false promise.
That's exactly right. Well, and it all falls under the whole big government mentality, Paul, of we know how to protect you better than you know how to. We know how to run your life better than you know how to. Trust us. And I think the last time we talked, I told you, growing up, I just fell under that assumption that I had a good government, they would take care of me, and everything was going to be rosy, rainbows and so on and so forth. But the older I get, the more I realize that's not the case. They don't know. Was it Reagan who said that when we decide that a far distant group in a land, can handle our freedoms better than we can, then we are a nation gone under.
Yeah.
And I believe that, beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's all about personal responsibility. Even in the Bible, and again, everything that's gun-related nowadays is about the weapon. Everybody's trying to take the weapon away. It's always the gun's fault. When actually the first mass murder was when Cain slew Abel, and that was with a rock.
Mm-hmm.
So are we going to ban rocks? And I say mass murder because, 4 people and 4 of them were killed. So.
Yeah, 25% of the, that's pretty funny.
25% of the population,
Well, so,
anyway,
talk about that. Talk about that, John. So, John Calvin Martin, folks, he's a pastor who's you got a great name, by the way, if to be a pastor. We've talked about that one before. But so I just would like to I'd like to kind of pick your brain. Do you ever get that question, like, how can you as a pastor, be for the Second Amendment or be for arming yourself or anything else? I mean, I could give an answer to that, but I mean, how do you respond when people? It's almost like they're trying to call you a hypocrite in some way, right?
Right. Well, my first response, and I had this happen just a few weeks ago. A guy asked me, said, "How can you as a preacher carry a weapon? Don't you trust God?" And my quick response to him was, I said, "Oh, I trust God. He's never tried to rob me. I carry a gun because of men, because they have tried to rob me."
Yeah.
I think it gets deep, and you got to go into all the things from Genesis all the way. You can prove this, but the thing people want to do is they want to say throw up the 10 Commandments and say thou shalt not kill. Man, I agree with that 100%, but that is talking about intent. My heart's intent is never to kill somebody, but my heart's intent is always to defend my family and my property and my rights. And so there's a world of difference in killing and defending. Mm-hmm. When Jesus, now you flip to the New Testament, Jesus told his disciples as he sent them out, he said, if you don't have a sword, go buy one. In fact, he went to the point as to say, sell your garments to buy one. In other words, your protection, your bodily protection is more important than your protection from the elements. And I know that's pretty steep, and that's going to stir everything up, but that's what Jesus said. And so another thing, as I was preparing for this interview, dropped in my mind, is in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus told his disciples, he said, I'm sending you out among wolves. Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Now, that's the non-2A people have always used that as a rebuttal. You're supposed to be harmless as doves. Well, I get that. But why didn't Jesus say be wise as a dove?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You see, and the reason he said that was this. You can't trust a snake.
Right.
A snake will attack you whether it's provoked or not.
Mm-hmm.
A dove will not. A dove's automatic reflex is flight, leave, run, get away from trouble. Unless, and I've lived this firsthand, unless you start messing with his children. You start messing with his children, it's going to stay there and fight, because that's what God put in every creature. It is normal, it is natural, it is our right to defend our children, our family. When I became married, when I got married, which is pretty, unusual. Everybody didn't know if I even would, but I got married, and my responsibility is to protect my wife and my girls. Bottom line, and whether that affects, offends you or not, I'm okay with that offending you. That doesn't bother me at all, because my right, my God-given responsibility is to protect my family and my wife. And I'm going to tell you, brother, I'm going to do it, whether it's with a fork or butter knife or whatever, or rock, whatever it takes.
Let me ask you this on that subject. Did you see the Salt Bowl, controversy where there was a fake report or somebody thought they heard gunshots and everybody started scrambling?
Yes.
And did you see those people filing out? I mean, it was so scary to think. I just thought of sheep to the slaughter. Nobody.
That's exactly
It's a
right.
gun-free zone. What were your thoughts?
Well, that's exactly what I thought. I'm amazed, and because I was raised around weapons and guns, and raised my girls around guns, I just don't get the mentality of sheer terrified, petrified fear of a weapon, or a sound of a weapon, or supposedly a sound of a weapon. I don't get people being locked up like that in their own fear, but there are actually people that do. To me, and again, let me reference this back. That's why we're doing the Patriots of Act 746. We want to educate people that a sound should not terrify you to the point that you become a target. That you literally, if somebody had been outside, man, it would have been a fish in a shooting bowl. It's just been an easy thing. So, and as the old adage says, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And so back to POA, Paul, that's not our whole intent is to try to educate people. We're not mean. We're not violent. We never want to hurt anybody. We want to educate people to understand your rights, your God-given inalienable rights, are to be able to protect yourself. And if you don't have the Second Amendment, none of the other amendments matter.
That's exactly right. Hey, John Calvin Martin with the Patriots of Act 746. Very well said, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, my brother. Have a great day.
Yes, sir. You too, folks. It's the Patriots of Act 746. You just go to Facebook, type them in, Patriots of Act 746. And it's a closed group, but request to be a member and become part of the online sensation today. We've got to take a break. We'll be right back. Going to play the interview I got yesterday with the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, came to Arkansas. We'll play that exclusive when we come back.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Older folks have, when we're thinking about thinking creatively about solving a problem, finding a solution. And so these kids are looking at everyday issues and looking at their affection, having grown up with a digital world, and looking for an easier way to accomplish a task. And in this instance, think about the kids that might be saved because of it. She's had a lot of interest in her app. She's a remarkable young woman.
We're talking with Congressman French Hill. Let's talk about the economy. What are your thoughts on, you got the unemployment rate of young Americans is doing good. You've got excellent GDP growth, looking like, according to some, predictions, it's going to get even better. What are your thoughts on this, Congressman French Hill?
Well, Paul, look, just in the last few hours, we've had President Obama trying to take credit for the faster economic growth. And I just find that really preposterous. During the last couple of years,
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Conduit News exclusive. Chairman Devin Nunes of the House Intelligence Committee is in Arkansas. So what brings you to Arkansas, Chairman Devin Nunes?
Well, it's great to be here, and great to be here with you, with great people. So to have Rick Crawford, Congressman Crawford, who's one of my close allies in the House. He's on the House Intelligence Committee, along with the Agriculture Committee, but we work closely on the House Intelligence Committee together. And then, of course, French Hill, who's from the other part of the state, but he was here too. It's great to see both of them, and great to be out here to support them.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that French Hill race, I've been talking a lot about that. If the Make America Great Again agenda is going to continue, then French Hill has to go back to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and look, this is we've had this before where people come in and they kind of pretend they don't call themselves socialists, they don't call themselves left-wing, they don't talk about any policies, they don't admit that they'll vote for Nancy Pelosi. But I'm from California. I've seen Nancy Pelosi in action. We don't want her back here. Right. We don't want her back in Washington. And so I think French is going to do well because he's a very solid vote, a very solid member, has good constituent service, and just an all-around good guy. So I think the left nationwide, they're sending money from San Francisco, Hollywood, New York City. But at the end of the day, people are going to know that, and I think French is going to do well.
I agree. And there's some good polling out today showing French Hill with a great lead, or a good lead. Let's talk about Russia collusion. So isn't this really the left's attempt? I mean, really, they've been rejected, and now they want to make it about Russia. They want to delegitimize the American people, our will, who voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah, what I say about collusion in Russia, we've looked for collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. We haven't found any. We have found collusion between the Russians and the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party. People forget this, but the Clinton campaign and the Democrats paid a law firm that hired a special group to go out and get dirt from Russians on Donald Trump, and they fed that into the FBI. That is the very exact thing that they're accusing Donald Trump's campaign of doing. They were doing, and there needs to be an investigation of that. We on the House Intelligence Committee, we've uncovered that. We uncovered that they had paid for dirt that they bought from Russians and funneled it into the FBI, and we expect DOJ and FBI to investigate that too.
They got the FISA warrant because of all that. I mean, essentially, they bought. There's a lot of middlemen there, but they bought a FISA warrant. That's what it seems to me.
Used. Well, I think the concerning part is that they would take dirt from a political campaign, get a warrant in a secret court on an American citizen using that dirt from political operatives that ended up being totally false, not proven. That should have never been done. But they also gave it to the press, and the press ran news stories on it, and then they used the news stories to corroborate the dossier as if it was two different things. And that was totally wrong. And then we think the American people deserve to see the rest of what they used and the tools and techniques that were used to target the Trump campaign and Trump campaign associates. And that's what we're asking the president to declassify.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit about that. Is the declassification that's been reported, is that going to happen this week, you think?
Well, we hear that they're working on it. We hear that they're trying to get the approval process done. I mean, the president has the power just to do it. We're hopeful. We wanted it done last week. There's rumors that it may be this week. We'll see, because we do have the hurricane that's coming to the East Coast. So,
do you think or believe the American people will ever see the full FISA documents and applications for themselves? Will those ever be declassified?
I do. I believe that they will.
Wow.
I do. Ultimately, I believe they will, and I think people will be surprised at what's there.
You recently made a trip to London. The media, I read some reports about that. They seem to think it was unfruitful and everything else. Was it unfruitful?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is what I typically deal with. I'm attacked by the left on a daily basis with totally preposterous stories that are outrageous, just total lies. So I was coming back from the Middle East and Eastern Europe. Stopped in London. We stopped and went to some of our military facilities that are out there about a couple hours outside of London. I had time for basically one meeting. Had a meeting with the Deputy National Security Advisor for the British government, which I was very proud, very happy to meet with him. And the next morning I left. So I was in London for a total of 14 hours. And I get home to goofy stories about to fake news.
I mean, it's a real thing.
It's what we have to deal with on a daily basis.
Well, I will tell you this. I talked about the opportunity to get to interview you, Congressman Nunes, for a while, and I asked a lot of our listeners, what should I ask him? And I got this back. Just thank him for his tenacity and his courage.
Well, thank you.
I mean, on behalf of the listeners of Conduit News and the people of Arkansas, I just want to thank you for being tenacious and courageous.
I appreciate that, and I hope people also know that having Rick Crawford on our committee, and he's not in the limelight like some of us are, but probably he's smart. He doesn't want to take all the attacks, but as chairman of the committee, I have to be on point. And it's if I didn't have good guys like Rick Crawford there to back me up, it wouldn't be as easy.
Congressman Devin Nunes, I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Yes, sir. All right, so that was an interview yesterday when Devin Nunes was in Arkansas, and really, it was really great to meet him. It was great to meet him face to face. To look, this guy's on the front lines. And to be able to look him in the eye, he's sitting across the table from him. It was just something special, and I meant when I said about people have said thank him for his tenacity and his courage, because do you realize the facts that he is pursuing, and I have a feeling the things that he already knows to be true but cannot divulge yet have the possibility to destroy the Democrat Party forever. I want you to think about it. That's a huge statement. Okay. I think they have the maybe not destroy, but certainly when you're talking about what's at stake here, what the last administration did. I mean, at the very least, think about this for a second. I have a feeling at the very least destroy the legacy of Barack Obama. Now think about what that would do to the left. Now, and I mean to the point where the mainstream media has no choice but to report it. Because the revelations, when I asked Devin Nunes, you know what the biggest part of that interview was, in my opinion? Will the American people ever get to see, in your opinion, the FISA application and documents for themselves? And his answer was, yes, I believe so. That is a pretty big deal.
Folks, we've got one more hour coming your way next. Senator Brian King coming up next.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk, 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
We were training Afghani nationals that we were training who would put on the uniform of the coalition, who would take our supplies and our food and our training and then walk in with a suicide bomb or walk in and start shooting our own guys. And I think you all know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to be shy. It's Conduit.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Older folks have, when we're thinking about thinking creatively about solving a problem, finding a solution. And so these kids are looking at everyday issues and looking at their affection, having grown up with a digital world, and looking for an easier way to accomplish a task. And in this instance, you know, think about the kids that might be saved because of it. She's had a lot of interest in her app. She's a remarkable young woman.
We're talking with Congressman French Hill. Let's talk about the economy. What are your thoughts on, you got the unemployment rate of young Americans is doing good. You've got excellent GDP growth, looking like, according to some, predictions, it's going to get even better. What are your thoughts on this, Congressman French Hill?
Well, Paul, look, just in the last few hours, we've had President Obama trying to take credit for the faster economic growth. And I just find that really preposterous. During the last couple of years of President Bush, when we slumped into recession and then had the crash, and then all 8 years of President Obama, you had economic growth at 1.8% average for that period. That's the lowest since World War II. It was a very bad, anemic recovery. And part of that was the $1 trillion cost and complexity of the Affordable Care Act, cutting people's work hours back in the Affordable Care Act, putting on new regulations across all sizes of business, condemning business, passing the Dodd-Frank Act, which hurt loans for families and businesses and for individuals. So I think President Trump does deserve credit for the faster economic growth. When you see the removal of regulations, billions of dollars of costs removed in regulatory burden at the federal level by this president and by congressional action, as well as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. These have spurred economic growth and brought jobs back to the U.S. and created new opportunities. Plus, people are not talking down business. Trump, as a business guy, is out talking up business. So I really think it's impressive to see that we've now averaged 3.1% in the last 18 months, had this recent quarter just over 4%. The Atlanta Fed thinks we may get another quarter over 4%. And I just would say to listeners, those are not trends, but if we have a trend that has economic growth over 3%, that's excellent, really good. And it allows us to have the resources we need in our federal government, and that means that people are going to see higher wages and more job opportunities.
You are exactly right. And then, then you have small business optimism. As it's at a record high. People just feel good about going to work. And so it's just, really, really exciting times. And, we need to continue this. Don't need to go back to the old policies. We need to continue with these policies and, even better policies in the future.
Right. The Fed has been slowly raising interest rates. They've got a plan to slowly normalize rates from the absolute ridiculous levels that they stayed too low, in my view, too long after the crash based on the Fed's easing policy. I think they should have begun a slight increase earlier, but nonetheless, they're doing it. And we're seeing their timing on that's important because we're now seeing robust wage growth. We've seen the fastest wage growth for Americans in this last reporting period that we haven't seen in a decade. Mm-hmm. So people's wages are going up. I know the opposition political party claims they're not, but they are. And so I think, again, that's because productivity is gaining.
I heard somebody say, well, first of all, the Democrats want to undo the tax cut, the tax legislation from last year. But it's I heard, I can't remember who it was. It might have been a fellow talk radio host, but they were saying, the Democrats called the tax cut crumbs, but now they want their crumbs back. They want to undo what has been done here.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. They have they have nothing to run on this fall.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey, folks, welcome. It's hour number 2. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Paul. As you just heard, it's the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. Please welcome back to the program. We have Senator Brian King from Arkansas District 5. Brian, it's always great to have you on, sir.
Hey, good to be on, Paul.
Okay, so I want to have you on because we always, talk about Arkansas corruption with you, and it seems like, we haven't had you on in a while. There's been a lot that's happened, and I'm just curious, generally speaking, we have, Jeremy Hutchinson's been indicted. We have the sentencing for John Woods getting 18-plus years. What are your thoughts generally about the landscape right now?
Well, Paul, first I want to say is I want to break some news with you that I've had a change of heart and maybe change of views in the way I did things. If you remember when I ran those Medicaid disclosure bills, people like Jeremy Hutchinson would say, I was mean, I was a bully, and people would talk about, well, it's just the way you come across, Brian. It's just how you do it. It's not the fact that, they're getting $500,000 in alleged kickbacks at this time that they didn't want exposed, but it was the way I, just came about. And, like I said, I just came across mean as in a bully and all that stuff. Remember all that stuff, Paul?
Yes, I remember all of that.
Well, I want to say this. Maybe they were right, okay? But I would have to think now, after all this finally comes out, maybe if I would have been nicer, maybe if I would have just, brought some, flowers or, just something. And it looks, with Jeremy, maybe I just had to up the ante. Instead of $500,000, maybe $750,000. Okay, maybe that's what it done it. Being nice and more money, because as we see what's happening down here with the Medicaid entities, more and more comes out. And Paul, it's not just small amounts of money. It's not $5,000. It's not a trip somewhere. It's $500,000. It's World Series suite tickets. Unfortunately, I don't have $750,000. Our billions given to me by the taxpayers to turn around and give millions back to legislators in private deals that they don't want exposed. But, World Series suite tickets, that's tough. Me and my brother used to call the Green Forest football games, maybe the best I could offer was, inside a press box, at the Green Forest Tigers and Elkin. That's the best. I can't, World Series suite tickets, I don't know how you begin to do that.
You're right about the amount of money. Just today we have this guy by the last name of Noble who was a psychologist at Preferred Family Healthcare, and in a 28-page plea, he's pled guilty to knowing about the schemes, the embezzlement, the theft, and he personally got $4.3 million, and that's just a skim off of what everybody else was making. So it still continues. Day after day, we see the corruption in Missouri and Arkansas with this preferred family health care. And this is the same group that is in the Milton Rusty Cranford plea. He says he gave Jeremy Hutchinson $500,000 in kickbacks.
Yeah, so, I mean, this Noble guy, I guess, is that just now come out, or is that something new, or is that...
It was today. Yeah, it was posted today. Eric Besson, Lisa Hammersley, about him pleading guilty.
Wow.
Yeah, Keith Noble is the guy's name who pled guilty. That's the news of today. So I'd like to get your thoughts on this, Senator King. You know, the biggest story last week, I think, was the revelation, thanks to Tim Brooks releasing the sealed documents, that were sealed documents in the John Woods case, is that John Woods went to Jim Hendren, Senator Hendren, the incoming president pro tem, the governor's other nephew, and asked for a $10,000 bribe in the event that both of them got put in the same district after redistricting. And John Woods was saying, listen, I won't run against you if you pay me $10,000. It was reported that Jim went to the authorities. The authorities said, we're going to need you to wear a wire if you want us to actually pursue charges. And Jim Hendren said, I'm not going to wear a wire. And then he didn't file an ethics complaint. This is now, fast forward, we have all this corruption. Jim Hendren is trying to be the leader of reform in the parade, even though he's been down here the whole time, hasn't said a word about it. And now he's trying to say, well, we've got these new ethics rules where senators are going to tattle on each other. Are you skeptical about this? Does Senator Hendren have credibility at this point?
I think the question is, why did he support him in re-election? I mean, my understanding was they were all supporting John in his re-election. So, you know, why did he support him in the re-election? And, you know, with the release of the documents, it finally put back everything that we kept saying about the original private option Medicaid expansion insurance scam that style Medicaid expansion they came up with, was that John traded his votes for personal favors. I mean, not just political favors. It wasn't political horse trading, which is, you know, probably legal, but I mean, I guess it is legal whenever you trade and say, hey, I'll vote for this project and you vote for this project. No, it's just flat out personal favors. So how do you sit down there in the legislature and say you're righting the ship and going ahead when literally these Medicaid entities have been backing up the Brinks truck at the back of DHS over there for years and hauling off hundreds of millions of dollars of your tax dollars? Hundreds of millions. And all of a sudden now you want to say, I mean, if somebody goes in and robs a bank in downtown Little Rock or rural Arkansas and makes off with $50,000 or $10,000 or $15,000, it's major news. There's investigation. These guys have been hauling off millions, hundreds of millions of dollars over there at DHS, and all of a sudden they don't want to look into it or say it. And just like this incident comes out, you know, but once again, why did Jim support John in his re-election?
That's a great question, because they did. So did Governor Asa Hutchinson. It seems to me because of it was all because of his vote for Medicaid expansion too. I mean, it was that's been the dividing issue among Republicans for the last several election cycles. John Woods was going to vote for Medicaid expansion. Sharon Lloyd was going to vote against Medicaid expansion. So they backed John Woods, knowing that he was corrupt. And knowing that he's going to trade his vote, and they don't care, because this is about a $2 billion windfall to the state, and people are making money off of this.
Yeah, and I think it even goes farther. It's not as I said, this is not about the merits of a program. It's not about the benefits, the pros and the cons, the direction the state should go in how they spend, you know, billions in Medicaid dollars. Look at this insurance scam, Medicaid expansion. Whose pockets does it wind up in? Big insurance companies. Look at all the personal favors, cronyism that we've seen on the top. Look at the part of Preferred Family Health. Look at the part of the Southern Arkansas part. And when you sit there and go, look at who's getting their pockets lined out of this? I mean, who stands to really benefit out of it? You know, they'll sit there and say, Jim Hendren and others, Jonathan Dismang, when they advocate these programs, this is all about helping the poor people. Well, no. Jonathan Dismang got his friends helped out by this legislation. And it just makes you wonder, and where the media is not asking questions about all this is, I mean, you even had the part about Cranford released in documents that he went to someone in the governor's office and tried to get somebody out of prison early that had committed murder. I mean, can you imagine? And that's what the media will not do down there, is investigate, ask questions, do anything. I mean, if something comes out and they have to report it, they'll do that, and then it's on to going forward that we're going to clean the mess up. It's not about responsibility. What did you know? What happened? Can you imagine if Donald Trump's nephew got named in a $500,000 kickback scheme? How they'd be going crazy? I mean, it's just this world down there is not in reality. They do not want to. And if you start saying something or trying to hold people accountable, you know, or ask questions or get into exposing this, well, all of a sudden, you're the problem. You're a terrorist. You know, Paul, you're a terrorist. You know, Jeremy Hutchison is not a problem to the state of Arkansas, okay? Jeremy Hutchison is nothing. Michael Lamoureux's been named out there. All the stuff John Wood said, it's like that's not an issue. Don't even want to talk about looking into what happened. You know, why did I do this? What's your responsibility? How did it get here? Were you taking steps to stop it? It's just mainly, you know, Paul, you're a terrorist. I'm a terrorist. That's all we are. I mean, it is just so unreal that how these people are denying reality. And, you know, once again, the media allows it to happen.
Yeah. It was very interesting when Senator Hendren, you know, compared Conduit to terrorists in Afghanistan that put on the, you know, Allied uniform and then go into the, you know, the camp and shoot their own guys or whatever. Yeah, that is very
very
when
offensive. Jeremy Hutchison is sitting up there with World Series suite tickets. Okay, I don't even know what they would cost. I was assuming, you know, World Series tickets, anything would cost, I don't know, what, $3,000 to $7,000? I don't even know. I didn't even get on StubHub and check because I couldn't even go. But obviously Jeremy Hutchison could go, okay? And not only could he go, he sat in the suite. I mean, I don't know, is that $15,000, $25,000? And Jeremy Hutchison can vote and steer legislation to make sure these people have access, you know, routes that they're going to be paid with your tax dollars. And that's not a problem to Jim Hendren, okay? And it's funny how John Woods can be, and John needs to be held accountable, and he certainly was, and the GIF and the Rusty Cranford part, and now this other $1 million thing that came out. John Woods can do all that, but yet, you know, Jeremy Hutchison, you know, it's not an issue. Nothing to see here, folks.
You really raised a lot of interesting points here, and it's really something that I missed, and that is the part about him and him selling his vote for the private option for personal favors. Back to John Woods, and yet the main reason, and this is kind of all, you know, I'm thinking of all this right now. The main reason they supported him for re-election is because they had to have his vote for.
That's right.
For the private option. That really blows the lid off of this entire thing, and it says everything that we suspected this whole time has been true, and yet now Senator Hendren is the incoming president pro temp of the Senate, and he's been down there the whole time. He said nothing, and now he wants to lead and be credible on ethics. I just don't know. I don't know. I think Senator Jim Hendren should step down as the president pro temp. I mean, I really do. I think at this point, if the institution of the Senate is serious about restoring its credibility, I don't think he's the guy to do it. I don't think he's the guy to lead people out of this mess.
Yeah, I think Jim Henry needs to answer some serious questions. I personally, in personal conversations, I've put tough questions to him, and he doesn't like it. Okay? And, if John Woods traded his vote for, what people, if he was a real leader and wanted to step up and really get to the bottom of what's happened down there, as I mentioned, think of it like a bank robbery. Okay? That's basically what happened with these political people that made sure their people were taken care of, who then turned around and lined their pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? He ought to be asking and demanding who else sold their vote for Medicaid expansion.
Yeah.
Okay? For personal gain. Who else has been dealing with these Medicaid entities for personal gain? I mean, that's where the real question lies. What else did Jeremy Hutchison do? This is just what has come and scratched the surface. I could tell you right now, there's a lot of other things that Jeremy Hutchison needs to be answering about his personal involvement with legislation and with the opening of, that's came out in the public already. They need to be asking more questions about people and members down there. But Jim Henry is not doing that, and he doesn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And the question is, why, Jim?
The whole thing was a fraud. It's the biggest fraud. A Medicaid expansion using insurance companies is the biggest fraud on the people of Arkansas in my opinion, the entire history of the state. I don't know if you can get much worse than what's going on, and we still don't know. Like you just said, we still don't know. Who sold their vote for personal favors. We knew there was allegations of bribes. The John Woods documents confirm it, and yet they supported him anyway. They knew how corrupt he was. They'd rather have a corrupt Republican than an honest, principled Republican, and that's the big takeaway here. Brian, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, and then you go even farther of look at this legal defense fund that they're setting up out here for Jeremy. Come help Jeremy get off of this. I mean, I don't call it the Jeremy Legal Defense Fund. I think it maybe needs to be called the let's fund this to help get Jeremy off where he don't rat on the rest of his fund. But, they need to be, like I said, it's like a bank robbery, folks. A bank robbery, you go through this set of steps. That's the same thing that's been happening with Arkansas people's tax dollars. But yet, I don't want to look at it. I know Jim Henry doesn't like to be asked tough questions about anything. I can tell you that personally. But you're a jihadist if you say anything or do anything about that. And like I said, media helps cover it up down there. They do not want to. They do not want to help look into it. And you have legislators down there that basically, I would rather run and lose an election. Okay, trying to fight and expose this stuff than to have won it and kept my mouth shut and be quiet about it, because this level and what has happened and everything down there, nobody needs to be silent about it.
Senator Brian King, it's always great to have you on, sir. I appreciate it so much.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Next time I'm going to be nicer and give somebody a $750,000.
Yeah,
and be nicer, and maybe then I can,
Yeah, and a box of chocolates, flowers, box of chocolates.
Yeah, something. Yeah, help me out, Paul. Throw me a bone and see if you can come up with.
Okay,
All
yeah,
right.
okay. Thanks, Brian. We appreciate it. Have a great day. Folks, we're going to take a break. Senator Brian King, big revelations there. Always great. That's why I wanted to have him on. It's always great to hear what he's thinking. We got to take a break. Back in a moment.
conservative legislation killed?
Or do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
Nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number 1 of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of uncle, nephew, and nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
It came out of nowhere. I was blindsided last election cycle when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you.
Uncle, nephew, and nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions.
Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yes, so we're gonna clip that interview out. If you want that interview by itself, go subscribe to our YouTube channel, Conduit News. Subscribe, click the little bell to receive notifications. But we're gonna have that Brian King interview up at Conduit News sometime today. That's really, it was a fantastic interview. If you want to know what's going on, you need to listen to him. I guess I told Joe after we got done with that, I was like, wow, I can hear the Marble Palace from here shaking because of the truth coming from Brian King and what he was saying today. You need to check it out. If you just missed this interview, you need to go back and you need to listen to it, you need to watch it. It's incredible. And let me know what you think. 870-275-9799. Given the news, should Jim Hendren step down as the president pro tem of the Senate? Does he have credibility to lead the Senate out of this corruption and terrible, terrible image that they have? At this point, with the John Woods revelations, I don't think so. I think it's a far cry from that, especially if we're going to, count on other legislators snitching on themselves. Folks, those of you listening on the great radio station, the Marshall KFPW out of Fort Smith, that's 1230 AM and 96.7 FM. I'm sure you guys have seen the headlines about Jake Files, convicted Senator Jake Files. We have news that he will not have to pay back the $27,000 in state general improvement funds. Files began serving an 18-month federal prison sentence on August 2nd after pleading guilty to wire fraud and money laundering. He resigned his position. The jury also ruled Tuesday that the city will have to pay more than $200,000 to 4 companies for work they performed on the complex, but for which they were never paid. So how does this happen, right? A Sebastian County Circuit Court jury decided Tuesday that Jake Files does not have to pay back the $27,000 he stole, but they, for a project he never completed. But they also ruled that the city does have to pay $200,000 for contractors that were never paid for their work. Now, something about those two decisions doesn't match up to me. Now, I'm not saying that the city isn't obligated to pay people who worked for the city and didn't get paid, independent of Jake Files, but then Jake Files isn't going to have to pay back the $27,000? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. What about you guys? Those of you listening to Fort Smith, what do you think about all this? I'd be interested to know. Folks, when we come back, going to be talking to Mr. Mark Meckler from the Convention of the States Project. Don't go anywhere. These Golden Fleece Awards, what are they?
Well, I do it every month. I find someone out in the federal government that's misusing our taxpayer dollars and point it out. And the reason for pointing it out is to try to get policy to change. People go, well, why do you make fun of somebody who's done something dumb, spending a bunch of money incorrectly or making a mistake or even losing money? You should be stopping it. Well, part of stopping it in a legislative environment, in a big, complicated government, is to point it out and to get the IG and the General Accountability Office engaged in trying to correct the behavior and getting it changed in law. So the Golden Fleece Award is handed out to the worst performer of the month who's fleecing our pockets from our tax dollars. I was inspired by my old senator from Wisconsin, Bill Proxmire, back in the 70s and 80s, handed out the Golden Fleece when I was a young staffer on the banking committee back in 1983. I used to get a big laugh out of it every month. And so, by golly, I brought it back when I got elected. It's a great way to communicate poor decision-making.
So this month's, I understand, was the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services for making...
Right, CMS.
Yeah, go ahead.
CMS is who is the federal Department over Human Services that oversees the Medicare and Medicaid services. So there's trillions of money flowing through that joint. And, well, back in 2014, I read an audit report that just was released a couple of months ago that says they spent $434 million to qualified health plan issuers that weren't eligible. And then they had another $500 million in improper financial assistance payments for enrollees without the right documentation. So there's $1 billion right there of mismanagement. Wow. And this is what they do every day. You know, Paul, that's the issue. Look, this is their mission. This is their core job. And yes, there are millions of people that are receiving the benefits of Medicare for our elderly or Medicaid for our poor. That's true. And they're big programs. But this is their main core mission. To find that kind of oversight in 1 year is shocking when we have $20 trillion in debt.
Yeah, that's it certainly is a true statement there. Well, Congressman Frenchell, I appreciate you so much.
Paul, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. And you have a great day.
Talk to you soon.
All righty.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Yesterday, I had the privilege. Joe, can you turn those pods off? I'm sorry. They're in my ear. Thank you. So yesterday I had the privilege of getting to interview Congressman Devin Nunes. We played that video for you, the audio of it, yesterday. I guess last hour. I'm gonna play it again here, probably in the next half hour before the show ends, just because it's only about a 6-minute interview, but it was just fascinating to get to do, and I want to thank Congressman Rick Crawford. It was his event. He's the one that brought Devin Nunes in. I want to thank Rick for allowing me to get an interview with Devin Nunes. But it was fascinating to get to talk to him, a guy who was on the front lines. So you could, if you guys want, that is already up at conduitnews.com, by the way. There's other news Today, I would be looking for, I guess Orrin Paris is supposed to be sentenced today. Orrin Paris is the former president, the head of Ecclesia College in northwest Arkansas. This was the entity that was used to essentially launder. It was one holding point for money to launder it to consulting firms that then paid off the legislators who sent the money to Ecclesia College in the first place via state grants. So it was a way to, it was an attempt to thoroughly wash the money, and it failed because John Woods was sentenced last week to 18 years. Now, Orrin Paris, he pled guilty pretty much at the last minute. If you'll remember, Orrin Paris pled guilty pretty much at the last minute, right before the trial of John Woods, Randall Shelton, and Orrin Paris was to begin. They were going to be tried, all three of them. And then Orrin Paris made a plea. He took a plea deal, and then the trial proceeded, and the convictions of John Woods and the convictions of Randall Shelton followed. John Woods got 18 years. Randall Shelton last week was sentenced to 6 years. Randall Shelton was the lobbyist of the, lobbyist slash consulting firm, and he also was a fundraiser supposedly for Ecclesia, but it was really just kind of a middleman. You basically existed to give the money to the politician. He's the one that gave John Woods money. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of sentence Orrin Paris III gets. And I also have to say, if we're going to talk about Orrin Paris, if we're going to talk about Ecclesia, which was or is a Christian college, it's really sad. First of all, it's sad that a Christian college is at the center of this kind of controversy. It's sad that we had text messages about plans to use medical marijuana tax revenue to fund a Christian college. I mean, that's what was one of the plans. They were going to try to write that. John Woods had a scheme, an attempt to write that into the law where they were going to divert. Essentially, and this is what is lost, I think, on so many people with Ecclesia College. Ecclesia College was struggling financially. They didn't have the money that they needed, even though the taxpayers were subsidizing their existence. This was an attempt to allow a Christian college, or really just say to allow a private institution, a private learning institution, to keep its privacy, to keep its anonymity, but to secretly have the taxpayers of Arkansas fund it. And essentially, it's a public institution at that point. Ecclesia College, if you really look at the books and how much money went to this school, Ecclesia College was a public university. Ecclesia College, and that was the attempt. John Woods was trying to make Ecclesia College a public university, but technically they would still remain private because we would never really know how they were getting their money. I mean, Ecclesia College was put into what's called a Work College Consortium program or designation, and they were the only one. And so then you go and you write bills for Ecclesia, but you don't write bills for Ecclesia. You go write bills to fund the Work College Consortium. Well, there's only one Work College Consortium designee, and that's Ecclesia, so they get all of the money. And it's a way to conceal public funding of a private institution. This doesn't need to be lost on people because, to my knowledge, the state of Arkansas has failed at auditing or attempting to get back the money that Ecclesia stole. That is apparent to me. And there needs to be, we need to know how the money was spent. We need those records. I mean, the Freedom of Information Act should absolutely apply to Ecclesia's private status because they took taxpayer money. And any reasonable person would agree with that in the interest of transparency and in the interest of, sunlight. So, anyway, the telephone number is 870-275-9799 if you would like to contribute to the program. That's 870-275-9799. Sorry, I'm just getting a text message there. Okay, what else do we have? Do we want to do that? Yeah, we can't. What are you saying, Joe, about Mark Meckler? Yeah. Let's do that. Okay, we're gonna take a quick break. Gonna reset. We're gonna come back, hopefully, with Mr. Mark Meckler from the Convention of the States Project. So, folks, don't go anywhere. Hold tight. We'll be back in just a moment.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights. Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
In 2014, I read an audit report that just was released a couple of months ago that says they spent $434 million to qualified health plan issuers that weren't eligible. And then they had another $500 million in improper financial assistance payments for enrollees without the right documentation. So there's $1 billion right there of mismanagement. Wow. And this is what they do every day. You know, Paul, that's the issue. Look, this is their mission. This is their core job. And yes, there are millions of people that are receiving the benefits of Medicare for our elderly or Medicaid for our poor. That's true. And they're big programs. But this is their main core mission. To find that kind of oversight in 1 year is shocking when we have $20 trillion in debt.
Yeah. That's it certainly is a true statement there.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, folks. Hey, welcome back to the program. We're kind of in the home stretch here. I want to welcome Mr. Mark Meckler to the program. Mark is the co-founder of the Convention of the States Project. You can find out more at conventionofstates.com. Mark Meckler, welcome to the program, sir. Good morning.
Fantastic to be with you this morning.
I'm glad to have you on. I've been following the Convention of the States idea for a long time, and I've heard both sides of the debate and everything else. What are your thoughts on this? What was your motivation here when you got behind this?
Well, for me personally, I got engaged in politics at the beginning of the Tea Party movement, like so many people. nationally. We've made incredible things happen, including turning Congress over in 2010. And ultimately, Paul, nothing happened. The swamp ate those people alive. Lots of good people went in, and they just got eaten up. Nothing changed. And if you want to see the ultimate end game of that politics alone, of the politics of just trying to elect good people, Republicans now have the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and they couldn't even put a bill on the president's desk to repeal Obamacare. So what I realized is politics as usual aren't working. There has to be another solution.
Yeah, and we've had Tea Party events here in Arkansas, and I've always heard a lot about this convention of the state. Now, former Senator Tom Coburn, he's affiliated with your group, right?
He is. He's a senior advisor to the project. I'm really privileged to travel the country with Tom. He's just one of those unusual statesmen that's always stood true to his principles. He managed to make it in the swamp and out of the swamp without compromising his values. And what Tom will tell you is the reason that he's engaged in this project, he actually left the Senate 2 years early to be engaged in this project, is because he believes that we will lose the country if we don't do this.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this. With some of the successes of President Donald Trump, and him winning when a lot of people, nobody thought he would, or at least the conventional wisdom at the time, is there less interest in pursuing an Article 5 convention now? I mean, have you noticed that happening? And what's your response if there is less interest now?
There actually isn't less interest, and here's why. Because people are watching the deep state, the swamp, push back against Donald Trump, and they realize that, and frankly, he can't do it by himself. I wish he could, in a sense, but in another sense, I'm glad he can. A president does not have enough power to reform the structure and the scope and the size of government by himself. That requires intervention of the people. That's how our system was designed. So while Donald Trump is doing the best he can in Washington, D.C., our job is not to sit back and spectate. It's to jump in and help him get the job done by calling a convention of states.
So where are you guys in that process? I mean, I know some organizations out there, they have mock conventions, or they just get people together from other states to try to plan what it might look like. What's the process? Where are you guys right now?
Sure, it takes 34 states to pass resolutions in both houses to call a convention. We've done that in 12 states, so we're over a third of the way there. And just in the last session, we've passed in 10 states in one house or another, so we're on our way. I expect 2019 to be a huge year for us. We did indeed, by the way, run a mock convention a year and a half ago. Because a convention of states had never been done, we brought in legislators from all over the country who wanted to watch how it operated. We didn't run it. We let the legislators run it. It was a huge success. And so where we're at is we are on the precipice of making this happen. There are over 3.5 million people involved today. We have representatives in every state legislative district in the nation. That's never been done before by any political project. And we've got folks like you said, Tom Coburn, Jim DeMint, Mark Levin, and frankly, across the political spectrum, at least on the Republican conservative side, you've got Marco Rubio and Ben Sass. Rand Paul recently endorsed. Just this week, Dr. James Dobson announced his endorsement. So the support is very broad.
What do you think we had Mark Levin, talk radio host, legendary talk radio host. I love Mark Levin so much. His book, The Liberty Amendments, he had some great ideas in there. What would you, if you could do one thing, what would you do?
For me, if there was a single thing that I could do and I could only do one thing, it would probably be repealing or revising our interpretation of the Commerce Clause. So the Commerce Clause was intended to give the federal government a tiny bit of power, just a little bit, to regulate the movement of goods across state lines. Yet, over the decades, the Supreme Court has interpreted it to give the federal government literally power over anything. There was a really important decision happened in the 1930s where the Supreme Court said that if a farmer grew wheat for his own consumption, he was engaged in commerce or business. And the reason they said that is they said because he wasn't buying wheat on the open market. So in other words, what that turned into, Paul, is not doing business is doing business, which means that the federal government can regulate absolutely anything. And this is where they get their power to run the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, the Department of Commerce, the EPA. So I would revise the interpretation of the Commerce Clause back to what it was originally intended to be. That simple change would likely eliminate the authority for somewhere between 30 and 40% of the federal government.
Wow. Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, that has been a perversion of, first principles. Okay, so let me ask you this, because I've got people on Facebook wanting me to ask this, and I've heard it many times because, there's always a debate when we talk about Article 5, the danger of a runaway convention, if you will. How do you respond to that fear from some?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple of ways. The first thing is I'm not an expert on everything. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I am an expert on this, just having worked on it for 5 years. And I would say listen to people you trust. So when I rattle off this list, and I can tell you that Mark Levin and Sean Hannity, Marco Rubio, and people like Rand Paul all support it, when I can tell you that every leading constitutional scholar in America that's weighed in on it supports it. Robbie George from Princeton and Randy Barnett from Georgetown. When I tell you guys like James Dobson have just come on board, you have to wonder, like, if this is such a bad, terrible thing, if we're going to lose our Constitution, are all these people just dumb? The answer is no, of course. These are incredibly intelligent people who've done their homework. Number two is you have to ask, where's that runaway argument come from? And you can research this on our website. David Horowitz is the greatest author on the American left in history. Horowitz wrote an article explaining that this is all leftist propaganda intended to keep moderates and conservatives from using the Constitution to save the Constitution. It's a propaganda campaign. So for those on the right, for your listeners that are worried about the runaway, they need to understand they are repeating the talking points of the radical left. And recently, a year ago, Good Friday, 230 of the most progressive, radical Marxist groups in America put out a press release together saying that this was the most dangerous thing that was happening on the right in America. And I would argue the truth is, if you're a radical leftist, if you like centralized power, if you like the federal government in control of your life, it is indeed the most dangerous thing happening in America.
Wow. Hey, Mark Meckler, I appreciate you coming on the program, spending a little time with us this morning from the Convention of the States Project. And it's great to meet you, sir. Thank you so much for coming on.
Great to be with you. And by the way, if your listeners want to get involved, and we need them there in Arkansas, we're going to get it done this coming year. Go to conventionofstates.com and get signed up.
All righty. Mark Meckler, everybody. Thank you so much, sir. Folks, when we come back, my interview with Congressman Devin Nunes yesterday. There isn't. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we've already taken that break. Okay. Well, without further ado, yesterday I sat down with Congressman Devin Nunes, the chairman of the Permanent Select House Committee on Intelligence. I think I got that wrong. But anyway, the House Intelligence Committee, the chairman Devin Nunes, sat down with him. He was in Jonesboro yesterday at a Rick Crawford event. Listen. Conduit News exclusive. Chairman Devin Nunes of the House Intelligence Committee is in Arkansas. So what brings you to Arkansas, Chairman Devin Nunes?
Well, it's great to be here, and great to be here with you, with great people. So to have Rick Crawford, Congressman Crawford, who's one of my close allies in the House. He's on the House Intelligence Committee, along with the Agriculture Committee, but we work closely on the House Intelligence Committee together. And then, of course, French Hill, who's from the other part of the state, but he was here too. It's great to see both of them, and great to be out here to support them.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that French Hill race, I've been talking a lot about that. I mean, if the Make America Great Again agenda is going to continue, then French Hill has to go back to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and look, this is we've had this before where people come in and they kind of pretend they don't call themselves socialists, they don't call themselves left-wing, they don't talk about any policies, they don't admit that they'll vote for Nancy Pelosi. But I'm from California. I've seen Nancy Pelosi in action. We don't want her back here. Right. We don't want her back in Washington. And so I think French is going to do well because he's a very solid vote, a very solid member, has good constituent service, and just an all-around good guy. So I think the left nationwide, they're sending money from San Francisco, Hollywood, New York City. But at the end of the day, people are going to know that, and I think French is going to do well.
I agree. And there's good polling out today showing French Hill with a great lead or a good lead. Let's talk about Russia collusion. So isn't this really the left's attempt? I mean, really, they've been rejected, and now they want to make it about Russia. They want to delegitimize the American people, our will, who voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah, what I say about collusion in Russia, we've looked for collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. We haven't found any. We have found collusion between the Russians and the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party. People forget this, but the Clinton campaign and the Democrats paid a law firm that hired a special group to go out and get dirt from Russians on Donald Trump, and they fed that into the FBI. That is the very exact thing that they're accusing Donald Trump's campaign of doing. They were doing, and there needs to be an investigation of that. We on the House Intelligence Committee, we've uncovered that. We uncovered that they had paid for dirt that they bought from Russians and funneled it into the FBI, and we expect DOJ and FBI to investigate that too.
They got the FISA warrant because of all that. I mean, essentially they bought. There's a lot of middlemen there, but they bought a FISA warrant. That's what it seems to me.
Used. Well, I think the concerning part is that they would take dirt from a political campaign, get a warrant in a secret court on an American citizen, using that dirt from political operatives that ended up being totally false, not proven. That should have never been done. But they also gave it to the press, and the press ran news stories on it, and then they used the news stories to corroborate the dossier as if it was two different things. And that was totally wrong. And then we think the American people deserve to see the rest of what they used and the tools and techniques that were used to target the Trump campaign and Trump campaign associates. And that's what we're asking the president to declassify.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit about that. Is the declassification that's been reported, is that going to happen this week, you think?
Well, we hear that they're working on it. We hear that they're trying to get the approval process done. I mean, the president has the power just to do it. We're hopeful. We wanted it done last week. There's rumors that it may be this week. We'll see, because we do have the hurricane that's coming to the East Coast. So,
do you think or believe the American people will ever see the full FISA documents and applications for themselves? Will those ever be declassified?
I do. I believe that they will.
Wow.
I do. Ultimately, I believe they will, and I think people will be surprised at what's there.
You recently made a trip to London. The media, I read some reports about that. They seem to think it was unfruitful and everything else. Was it unfruitful?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is what I typically deal with. I'm attacked by the left on a daily basis with totally preposterous stories that are outrageous, just total lies. So I was coming back from the Middle East and Eastern Europe. Stopped in London. We stopped and went to some of our military facilities that are out there about a couple hours outside of London. I had time for basically one meeting. Had a meeting with the Deputy National Security Advisor for the British government, which I was very proud, very happy to meet with him. And the next morning I left. So I was in London for a total of 14 hours. And I get home to goofy stories about to fake news.
I mean, it's a real thing.
It's what we have to deal with on a daily basis.
Well, I will tell you this. I talked about the opportunity to get to interview you, Congressman Nunes, for a while, and I asked a lot of our listeners, what should I ask him? And I got this back. Just thank him for his tenacity and his courage.
Well, thank you.
I mean, on behalf of the listeners of Conduit News and the people of Arkansas, I just want to thank you for being tenacious and courageous.
I appreciate that, and I hope people also know that having Rick Crawford on our committee, and he's not in the limelight like some of us are, but probably he's smart. He doesn't want to take all the attacks, but as chairman of the committee, I have to be on point. And it's if I didn't have good guys like Rick Crawford there to back me up, it wouldn't be as easy.
Congressman Devin Nunes, I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Yes, sir. Okay, so that story, ladies and gentlemen, that interview, if you want to listen to that again, it's up right now at conduitnews.com. This exclusive, Devin Nunes was in Arkansas yesterday. And, again, I think the biggest development there, I'm sure he said it other places, but he thinks that the American people at some point will get to see not only declassified Bruce and Nellie Orr documents, he thinks we will get to see the full FISA documents and applications. That at some point the American people are going to see the FISA applications and the documents that led up to really where we are now and the whole bogus Russia collusion narrative. And the idea that you would feed information, salacious information into the FBI sieve or funnel and eventually get your FISA warrant. I mean, But what you just heard there was the truth, and it's the truth that so many of people with Trump derangement syndrome haven't even ever heard. All they have heard is the sensationalist media that's out to get an emotional reaction, more clicks, more views, more ratings, as well as the fact that they really believe, Donald Trump is so anti-status quo, it's, has the potential. If the swamp is drained, then, there's people's wallets are going to be lighter. They don't want that. Arkansas, be safe.